This whole day has been so inspiring, and I will try to keep it quite simple in terms of the English and not too quick, so the translation can pick up on it. And they can have plenty of time. If I'm going too quickly, don't hesitate to jump in and let me know, okay? I actually had to let go quite a bit of the theoretical part of this workshop. I feel it's a little bit too much to really get into the theory this way in Zoom. And also it's now 10:14 p.m. in Israel. Yeah. And I will leave some time in the end for questions. So if you want me to get into a little bit more theory in the end, or anatomy in the end, if you have any anatomical or theoretical questions in the end, there will be time. Okay, I'm gonna concentrate a little bit more on not exactly practical, not just the practical aspects, but more the ones that really have to do with connection. And speaking about practicality, you can hear how my voice is closed at the moment. And I just want you to pay attention to this because I'm quite tense, of course, at the moment. And you can really maybe understand a little bit about the closure of my voice box at the moment. And I hope that it's going to change as we go along. So I prepared a presentation. Most of the workshop will be with a presentation. I hope it's going to be convenient for you just because some things I think are really important to see. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And all right. So I want to start with a beautiful poem that some of you, I think, know, and it's called The Guest House. It's by Sufi poet Rumi, and it says, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." And the reason I chose this to begin with is because difficult times arise and are part of our lives. There is absolutely nothing we can do to change that, but we can change our experience of it. And as bioenergetic therapists, by that we mean, can we do anything about the way they go through our body, through our nervous system, where in a way it all happens anyway? So this photo is from December 2019, when we could still hug relative strangers, if you can remember those bizarre times. And I chose this photo not just out of a narcissistic need, but also because for Stephen Porges, as for me, the most important message we can learn from the Polyvagal Theory is about connection, about contact, and not just eye contact or emotional contact, or even personal contact, about animal nature, and mostly about actual contact, body and soul, about how the need for contact is ingrained in our nervous system, ours and our mammalian brothers and sisters. And this basic need, or even drive, or even essence, is not only intra-species, but also works across species. Some people are joining now. So as we go through these photos, just see if you can notice how you feel in your body. And maybe something different feels about this last photo. Yeah, maybe there's a different feeling about this. So we want to start with the model we all learned of in school, and the way most medicine and psychology schools still teach today. The human nervous system has two main branches. Let me just get rid of this. Yeah, okay. They have two main branches, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. I don't think I'm saying anything new at this point. Central nervous system, we're not going to talk about almost at all in this talk. It consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system that carries messages to and from the periphery and the central nervous system is comprised of a somatic nervous system that controls mainly voluntary muscles and the autonomic nervous system. So we're narrowing in to where we're going. The autonomic nervous system controls involuntary body functions. And what we learned in school is that it has two parts. When everything is cool and okay, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a calm nervous system. It's active when everything is good, and we conserve and maintain energy and even consume energy with that nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the famous fight or flight system that arouses the body to expend energy. So this model, I'm assuming, is quite familiar to most of you, if not to all of you. Functions of these two branches are probably quite familiar. In our familiar model, we usually think of the two systems as either or. When one is on, it shuts down the other one, and vice versa, with an exclusive selection valve, okay? Now let me tell you, so this is sort of our baseline, and the baseline that the polyvagal theory gets into the picture. Now, I want to tell you a little story. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a late holiday in the Sinai Desert, and I went with my son, Adam, for a camel ride along the coast and into the hills. Now, I don't know if you were ever on a camel, but you get into this really groovy dance just pacing along because the camel has this movement going along. And as we were walking, we were chatting with the guide and interacting and drinking lots of water and feeling thirst and salivating a lot and kind of sailing along on our desert ships in parasympathetic bliss of calm heart, calm breath, and lots of social interest. We stopped for a tea break in the hills, beautiful tea. And as the break ended, we got back up on the camels' backs. It took 3 seconds before Adam's camel rose to its back legs, and another couple of seconds for mine to jump up. They literally threw us off. Camel is not a very small animal. It's high. And when it gets on its hind legs, it's very, very high. So Adam landed a little bit like a cat on his limbs. And it actually took me a moment to figure out what was going on. When I did look at him, I could see he was lightly bruised, scared, wide-eyed, and completely white in the face. The sympathetic nervous system kicked in, sending blood to the large muscles of the hands and legs and drawing it from where it wasn't necessary, the face. So Adam lands pretty much on his legs. I was really not so elegant. I was sitting on the camel's back, watching it rise up. And I remember in like a dreamlike state, I know I'm going to let go. I know I have no choice. I know I'm going to fall on my back and head. And I just couldn't do anything about it. I wasn't even terribly upset. I was just in shock. You know the state. Indeed, I landed smack on my back and ass, which was actually lucky because better to land on one's ass than on one's head. And my breathing stopped, just stopped. I took a few loud in and out breaths, and only when I got up, I noticed just how inelegant my situation was because my pants were wet. My sympathetic system innervated contraction of my bladder, and out came the lovely tea we just had. But only a while after I landed could I notice the wetness in my pants, the racing of my heart, and it actually took a while before I could feel the pain as the shock started to subside and the sympathetic system was full on. I raced to my son and focused on him. His system was more agile than mine. His shock was mild. And as I was willing to get right back on the camel's back immediately, just to get the trip over with, he, wisely and much more grounded, refused adamantly. Only as we got into the car that came to pick us up did I begin to feel the pain, and I could sob a little bit, facing the window and thaw the freeze response. So the old model, the old model has no way of explaining this. In real time, in the state of emergency, my heart was racing, but there was no fight or flight going on. There was an overpowering response of freeze. I can actually see some of you wording it, but that's actually not parasympathetic or sympathetic, is it? In order to understand, let's go to Porges' research of the parasympathetic system. It focuses on the vagus nerve. Most of the parasympathetic system is comprised of this nerve. It's a really long cranial nerve. It's called cranial nerve because along with 11 other nerves, it originates at the cranium, at the base of the brainstem, and branches down. The vagus nerve branches downwards all the way to the sacrum. It gave the parasympathetic system its nickname, the rest and digest system. So now I want to stop the presentation for a moment and I just want to stay for a minute to mention some things, two really interesting things about the vagus. One is that only 20% of its nerve fibers are efferent. Efferent means that they convey actions and movement orders from the brain to the body. Okay, only 20%. By the way, I have to say, I see some of you writing. I don't know if you're writing what I'm saying. You don't have to because I'm going to email you the presentation. So you can, if it's good for you to write, if you want to write and get it in, that's fine, of course, but you don't need to if you don't want to. So most of the nerve fibers that the vagus is comprised of, 80%, send information, not orders, but information from the body to the brain, telling the brain the vagus is working. And this information is translated by the cortex in the end as calm, as a situation of safety, as a situation of everything is really good. And the other fact I want you to remember at this point in our story is that the vagus functions together with its neighbors, those other 11 nerves originating from the brainstem that are called the cranial nerves. If we have time in the end, I'll show you a little diagram of these nerves. When one of these nerves fires, because they're so close together, they actually touch one another. The neighbors get stimulated and fire too. It's quite roughly speaking, but that's the way it happens. So when we smile and activate the trigeminal cranial nerve, we also activate the vagus. By the way, that's the reason behind the pop psychology recommendation to smile and feel better. We're going to understand that a little bit soon. So the vagus has to do with feel good, safe, joy and enjoy, peaceful, restful, even delight, and contact. Now for another interesting about the vagus. I'd like to ask you all to find your pulse, either at your wrist or the carotid, or you can place a hand on your heart. Just notice, zoom into your pulse. And see if there's any difference in the pulse from when you inhale and when you exhale. So now take a deep breath and see what happens to the pace. And see if you can make the out breath a little bit longer and see if anything happens to the pace. Anyone? You want to write it in the chat if anyone noticed anything? We don't all notice something. It's not a test. But if you have, the rate slowed when? During the long exhalation. Susan, do you want to open your mic?
Yes, sorry. Yes, during the long exhalation, I noticed it slowed. That surprised me.
Did it?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, anybody else find the same way?
Inhale, when I'm inhale, it not accelerates, but it makes it stronger. It pulses
When
more.
you inhale, it goes stronger. Yeah, but it doesn't, but does it go faster as well?
I didn't felt that. Maybe it just small bit.
Uh-huh. Okay. So what actually happens is this. This is something that Porges actually was researching before he got to the polyvagal theory. He said, or he found, that actually what happens is that the in-breath, what's in charge of the in-breath is the sympathetic system. Yeah, maybe that's why in a way you could feel it stronger, because the sympathetic system is a strong, aggressive system. And the out-breath is governed by the vagus. So what the vagus actually does, it breaks, not as in break, but as in puts the brake on the sympathetic system, okay? So the sympathetic pulse is actually quite quick, and that's what most of us have as a natural pulse. And when the out-breath kicks in the vagal brake, the pulse goes down. So the vagus is actually in charge of lower heart rate, calm body, more immune system activity, more insulin activity, lower blood sugar, lower blood pressure. Everything seems fantastic. It's a wonderful thing to have. But, says Porges, that's actually not that way. it is also in charge of the terminal break that happens in bradycardia. So now I'm going to share screen again and go back. Whoops. I don't know how many of you know what bradycardia is, but bradycardia actually is what goes on during when babies pass away, sudden infant death syndrome. Yeah. So look at this chart. And this is a normal heartbeat. Yeah. It goes up. This is every heartbeat is this. Yeah. It spikes. And in bradycardia, what happens is the vagus kicks in so much and so strongly that it brings the pulse to a slow, life-threatening slowness, okay? And that can kill you. Or, and this is what Porges actually says, there are two vagus nerves. It's not one nerve that can keep you calm and safe and feeling good and wanting contact, and the other can kill you. There are two vaguses, or rather two branches for the vagus nerve. One of them, the first one, is common for us and for mammals, and it's called the ventral vagus. Ventral because Porges says that the two branches stem from somewhat different locations. One is more in the back and one is more in the front. So the one that's more in the front is the ventral vagus, is in charge of the organs above the diaphragm. This is the polyvagal theory. It's uniquely mammalian, says Porges. It slows down metabolism. It's a system that goes on during conditions of safety. It has to do with rest and digest, of movement, of joy. And Porges coined the name, the social engagement system. I didn't go into exactly why and what happens. Porges has a beautiful explanation. And he also has a beautiful way of saying how part of the social engagement system works by the way that we co-regulate with each other by looking and hearing and feeling ourselves with another person, and how we do this co-regulation together, and also through a system of neuroception. And as I said, if we have time at the end, I'll go into these technical matters as well. But for the moment, we can just rest in knowing that this is the social engagement system, which is unique for mammalians who have a long period in which the babies are dependent on the parents. And says Porges, I'm sorry, this is a mistake. It is myelinated, okay? This is a mistake. It's not non-myelinated, it is myelinated. Myelin is the covering of nerve cells, which is more advanced in terms of evolution, and it has a much faster conduction because it has also an electric conduction, not only a chemical conduction. And what Porges says is that this is the proof that it is a higher level, evolutionary speaking, higher level nerve than the other nerve, which is the dorsal vagus, which is common for reptilians and mammalians. It shuts down metabolism. It operates, or it kicks in during conditions of serious threat, life-threatening threat. It has to do with immobilization, shutdown, and freeze. It's a defense mechanism. And of course, it's non-myelinated. Now you can see that I have a little star here. And the reason is that actually much of the criticism on the polyvagal theory has to do with this because it's not really clear. It's not clear cut that there are actually two nerves. And it's certainly not clear cut that there are two differently myelinated nerves. So since the full-blown dorsal vagus response is so violent, leading to bradycardia and near death, if not full-blown death, the human organism in our highly intense life developed, in our highly intense life, developed a variation of a dorsal response, which is less lethal, and it's called dissociation. It's a form of dorsal arousal. In the animal kingdom, the odds of being caught by a lion more than once in your lifetime, are very, very slim. So let's look at such a response in the wild. And it's quite self-explanatory. Let me just double check. I'm not sure that I have the volume on, so let me just check. Yes, I do. All right. Notice the eyes. That's a shock response. Sorry. Now a jackal is arriving and distracting the cheetah. Notice the head flop. Lucky Impala. So she's left to her own devices and still in shock. So you could see a little bit of pulse. Now the breathing starts. No muscle tone yet. Shaking and trembling, necessary for the organs to work. And when it can, it jumps off into the horizon. Okay. Okay. Have you ever seen this video? Anybody? Not yet. No. Okay. Okay. So much of post-traumatic situations have to do with, in a way, getting stuck in the dorsal response that we just saw. And much of the current polyvagal informed therapies use it to understand and treat trauma by addressing the nervous system and working directly with it. But in this short presentation, I won't get into it. If anyone is interested, I can recommend some literature and some further teaching on the subject of trauma. So actually now we don't have a double nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic. We have a three-part triune nervous system model. Hang on, so many windows open here. Just 1 second. Now you have to stop. And I have to get this back. So we're talking about a triune system. Yeah, remember the central nervous system? Not talking about it in this presentation. Peripheral nervous system, somatic and autonomic. We're down to the autonomic nervous system. Remember, just like before. But here comes the difference. The autonomic nervous system, which we are used to think of comprising as sympathetic and parasympathetic, in fact, according to the theory, has a sympathetic system, which is defensive, and a parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the social engagement system of rest and digest. Does everybody see the mouse here? Yeah, okay. And we have a defense system, which is for minor and major emergency states. One of them is for minor states that call for action, fight or flight, sympathetic, and the other is for disastrous, life-threatening situations where we can't do anything about it and we might as well go into a protective shock state. Questions still here? Let me just get the chat. Sorry. Okay. Questions, anyone? No. Okay. So we continue. Deb Dana, I don't know if you know her. She's a psychologist. She works with Porges. And I remind you, Porges is a neurologist. He's not a clinical, he's not a psychologist. He's not a psychiatrist, even though I've read in one place that he is, but he's not a psychiatrist. He's a neurologist or a neuropsychologist. And Deb Dana is actually a clinical psychologist that works with Porges, and she suggested looking at the nervous system as a ladder, okay? We start almost as a default when we start our lives or get up in the morning in a ventral state. And then reality kicks in. Yeah, we're attacked from the outside or from within by hunger or cold or wetness, or from the outside by aggression or lack of something we desperately need, like food or love or safety, or by an excess of something we don't need, like anger or danger. Then we are thrown upwards from the safety and social engagement system, and the sympathetic arousal kicks in, fight or flight, to do something about the situation, to solve or avoid it, to deal with it, yeah, in terms of fight or flight. When a more serious emergency comes up that we can do nothing about, that we can't fight or flight, when we're trapped or helpless or hopeless, that's where the dorsal state kicks in. So we can be roughly saying in any place along an emotional, energetic ladder. Now, life happens, you know, things happen. We want to master this sliding up and down this ladder comfortably and easily rather than getting stuck on one level. Now, of course, life will take care of the upward movement because stuff happens all the time. And we get knocked off balance and thrown from the bliss of ventral. But it can also be self-regulation that gets us down again, grounded in social engagement. So we want to get as grounded as we can in ventral, or as Dave Dana calls it, anchored in ventral. But we need to be able to shift from it to fight or flight if we're to live or drive or fly or deal with the everyday stresses of life, not to mention land on our feet when a camel throws us off its back. So we need to shut down in cases where the emergency is so powerful that nothing we do will help. We might as well go through it with as little pain and suffering as possible and let reality take care of us. Sometimes getting under the swell and letting it pass without us being there at all is actually the right thing to do. Yeah? You could see that impala, when she's held in her neck by the cheetah, she would only suffer if she weren't in shock. And just the other week, a pregnant patient of mine who's 37 came into my office right after a 14-week sonogram where she was laughing with her doctor when he went all quiet, and she immediately understood there was something wrong with her baby. And she just went numb. It all went above her head. She didn't recall anything past this point. Not what was actually wrong with the baby, not the sex of the baby, not even the instructions for the abortion she had to have later that week. Nothing. Only during that session in my office could the dorsal defense mechanism thaw, unfreeze enough for the grief to start being felt. And a deep crying came up from the depths, and she could start to feel and work it through. So now is something that I mentioned, that the way to come down from dorsal, from the depth of dorsal, we can't go straight from dorsal to social engagement without passing through the sympathetic excitation. Okay? I think that's something that bioenergetic therapists, in a way, we know intuitively, yeah? So how does this work, and what rules this regulation, and can we promote resilience? So please consider the following situation. I'm sitting with a difficult patient, and this woman really triggers me. She accuses me of being harmful and not clever and irresponsible and a rotten clinician. You know the type. My teacher, Phil Helfer, would have called her VDP, a very difficult person. That's one of the non-DSM diagnoses. What happens is that I failed to give her enough notice of a getaway weekend, and I know how fragile she is, and it's not a good time for her. She needs much more of me. Now, I get it. I really get it, and I get what's going on with her. But my pulse starts racing, and this whole cascade is going on inside me. This whole sympathetic attack. In spite of my better judgment, the sympathetic system is full on, and there's not much I can do about it. It just comes on. But is there anything I can do before I lose contact with her? Forget, in my body, forget our connection, or even lash out defensively? We have several ways, some of them you know very well, to discharge excess sympathetic arousal. So what does actually the polyvagal theory add? It adds specific pathways in which we self-regulate, and discharge is one of them. So grounding in ventral. Porges mentions several pathways to strengthen vagal tone, because a nerve is like a muscle and we can strengthen its tone, yeah? He calls these portals like gates, and the portals that he mentions are singing, elongating the out breath, yeah, which kicks in the vagal brake. He recommends wind instruments, which is the reason that Adam, my son, learns the trombone now. And He also he developed the SSP. I don't know if you know about it. It's the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is like a business that Porges developed. And it's actually, I just read today that he calls it a neurologic music therapy. What it does, it actually, they manipulated music into working with certain frequencies that move the inner ear bones and get the whole social engagement system going. So we want to ground this in bioenergetics, and actually Reich and Lowen add quite a bit here. Because if we have a look at the segments above the diaphragm, which you know, we can match the ventral vagal pathways. Yeah, we have the oral and the ocular and the cervical and the thoracic. Now we go to the vagus nerve and some other nerves of the social engagement system, the cranial nerves, which I mentioned earlier. And they fire together and we activate them. Now remember the 80% afferent nerves, remember the feedback loop? This is where they come in. We fire these nerves up and send up the message that the vagus is on. Yeah, my kids would say that it's like cheat nerve manipulation. You understand what I'm saying? Is it clear? Okay, so let's do some cheating. But before we do some cheating, I'd like to ask if you have any questions until now. And as I think of it now, I think there's one more really good slide that I actually left out because I took out a lot of theoretical stuff. But let me just show this one and get this out of the way so I can present it. There we go. Okay. So this is like a diagram. Where is it? Here it is. Of the so the central nervous system, the way it usually works, yeah, is the central nervous system perceives safety. Okay, I'm in a calm situation, I'm at home or in the cave in the olden times, and I'm not too hungry, I'm feeling okay, I'm surrounded with friends and family whom I trust. Central nervous system perceives safety. Social engagement system is turned on. Vagus efferent fibers fire, and they turn on the end organs. I smile, I drink, I eat, I slow down my breath, I slow down my pulse, all social engagement behaviors. Now, what would happen if we did it the other way around? What if we started at the end and we had the end organs on? And then we would have the afferent nerves carrying information from the periphery to the brain turn on. And then they would turn on, in fact, the social engagement system, the other nerves as well. And then central nervous system would perceive safety. So this is actually the process that we're talking about. And now I want to do a little bit of cheat. Okay, so this is a basic exercise that I learned from a book written by Stanley Rosenberg. Stanley Rosenberg is, actually he doesn't know that, but he's my first teacher to the Polyvagal Theory much before I met Porges, and he's a craniosacral therapist. And he has some really good exercises for turning on the vagus. But before we go into the practice part of this presentation, any questions? Any questions on theory or anatomy? Okay, so let's do our first basic exercise. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our hands, the back of our hands, and put them together and slide the fingers in quite strongly. So we have our fingers here, and we can use our fingers as like acupressure points. Yeah. You actually have the photo. Okay. And now what we want to do, if somebody has a problem with the arms or with the neck, you can give up on the hands. It just makes it a little bit better. Now, you want to sit comfortably. Actually, let go of the hands for a minute. And let's establish, see, this is my sympathetic system kicked in. Okay, so we want to sit. You can actually, all of the exercises that we're going to do today, you can do sitting down, but I really recommend doing them on your feet. I prefer to sit down so you can watch me because most of the work is going to be with the face and head today, but I want to urge you, either really take the time to feel grounded in your chair with the ass on the chair and the feet on the floor, and the back against the chair. So we're sitting on the skeleton, so we don't have to work the muscles too much, and the muscles can really relax. And we can give the body the conditions to feel safe. Because if we want to turn on the social engagement system, we have to be in a safe environment. And that means, first of all, of course, being grounded on the ground. Okay, so you can either sit in your chair or you can stand. And now let's take like a baseline of movement of these muscles that are innervated by the vagus. And let's just take our heads from side to side and just notice how much movement you have. Just notice how easy or it is to actually move from side to side. All right, so we have like a baseline. Now let's take our hands again and fold the fingers in really well, put it behind our heads. And now we're going to do something really simple. We're going to look to the right. Just look to the right. How far, we want to look actually as far back to the right as convenient, as comfortable. I don't want to feel any pain. And if I go too far, I might feel nauseous or dizzy. And that means I went too far. So keep looking to your right. And if you're chewing gum, it might ruin your experiment. Just saying. For you, for me, it's okay. All right. Now let's come back. If you need to shake your hands, you can shake your hands a little bit. And now we're going to look to the left. You can look at the edge of your elbow, and if it's comfortable for you, you can even look more to the back. The more you look to the back, the more response you're going to get. You leave your nose facing forward, just the eyes, look to the left. Yeah. And it's okay to do it without the hands, of course. Okay. So anything come up? Anything that you noticed? You can open your mics. Anyone notice any reaction, any response?
I've been taught this and I've done it. And what happens every single time is I take a deep breath.
You take a deep breath.
A deep breath.
Perfect.
And it's automatic.
It's automatic. Yeah. Okay, great. Great. Anyone else?
I just feel really, really relaxed. Like just, I don't know. I didn't actually notice it until you started to ask us to check in, and yeah, I kind of feel a little spacey even.
Even a little spacey, so maybe a little bit less grounded.
Maybe.
I'm not sure that spacey.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's relaxed. I think I just feel very at ease, or content is more. Yeah.
Nice. Good for you. Okay. Great. Thanks, Angela. Anyone else?
I feel, sorry. I feel
go ahead.
My arms a bit hot, and my neck is very relaxed now.
Relaxed. Let's all of us see what happened to our movement.
It's bigger.
It's bigger.
I can, yes, I can move.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Rodrigo. Thanks.
I felt a little dizzy, but easiest to move.
Yeah. Easier to move and also a little bit dizzy. You know, next time, let me just show something, because when dizziness kicks in, the way that I understand it is that maybe the dorsal vagus got triggered, because the dorsal vagus, what it actually does is it constricts, it tones the whole digestive system, and it could maybe have to do with the constriction of the stomach. Sometimes nausea or dizziness have to do with a dorsal response. So, and that can happen in this exercise if we move it too far. I don't know exactly why. I'm not sure anyway why in terms of the anatomy of it. But I do know that, let me just put this book so we have a plane, So we have now this plane to talk about. So I want to look here, okay? My ideal is to hold the book this way. I can still see it. But if I get nauseous or dizzy, I'll just move it forward. And if I'm here and I get nauseous or dizzy, I'll move it forward yet. So it has to be comfortable. And the reason is that we don't want to trigger the dorsal system. Thanks. Thanks, Gustavo. Anyone else? Any other reactions that you noticed? So let's go to some common signs so that we know that the vagus is on. First is actually yawning. It's 11:08 p.m. in Israel. So there's yawning. And we're going to talk about yawning in a minute. There's an opening of the ears sensation. Like after you landed on a plane. There's swallowing, spontaneous swallowing. There's taking an extra breath, like Angela was saying, like Susan was saying, sorry. There's a little noise, like little subtle noises that we get in our stomach. and there's air coming from one of the openings in our bodies, okay? So these are signs that the vagus is on. And what I want to suggest is other exercises that have to do with the ocular segment. For instance, let me show you some other exercises that actually turn the vagus on, but I want to say something before that. I want to say that the more we are grounded in ventral, the easier we'll come to ventral when we need to. Because when something happens and our body goes into, for instance, with my patient, I actually sat in front of her. I couldn't do this exercise because she would have seen me, but I could do a lot of other stuff that she couldn't notice. And I was working with myself to regulate my nervous system, because I know that I'm sitting in front of her. I know I shouldn't be reactive, and I know that I shouldn't lash out, and I know that I shouldn't be defensive. I know that all I have to do is apologize for not notifying her earlier that I'm taking a week off. I know. And then I have to take the heat, and I have, when she cools down, to be able to talk to her about this heat and the devaluation and everything that goes on with it. I know, but my body is so sympathetic. My pulse races, and I can't sit quietly, because the sympathetic system, when it is on, it is a very, I think the word that comes up to describe the feeling, it's like a disgusting feeling. It's really difficult to be in our bodies in sympathetic arousal. It's a horrible feeling to sit with. And I really want to be able to sit there and be with her until she can cool down, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay? So, ocular segment exercises. I want to show you another one. Let me just get into the camera. This is the ear, and I want to get, this is the hole of the ear, and above the hole of the ear, I want to get in here. Okay? So it's not the first fold, it's the second fold. I want to get in there. And I just want to play with it a little bit. Just hold the ear, and you could play with it. Just press it a little bit and see if something comes up. Maybe the ears will open. Maybe a yawn, great Angela, will come up. Maybe an out breath will be longer. See if anything happens. Little dizziness. Oh no, that was before, sorry. Okay. I can see some yawns coming up, and I want to say something about a yawn. I think there are about 20 theories about why we yawn. It has to do with too much CO2. It has to do with cooling the brain. It might have to do with getting a lot of oxygen in really quickly. I don't know. There are, as I said, several theories about it, but I want to say that what happens when we yawn, we feel sort of uncomfortable, and somebody sitting in front of us can ask us if they're boring, and that's why we yawn. But actually, we yawn when we relax. And when we are relaxed, we can feel our chronic fatigue and our chronic, what's the word in English? Effort, the chronic effort that we put in all the time. And we kind of let go of that because the body can relax and get into a more relaxed state. So actually a yawn is a sign of vagal activation. Another exercise that we can do is, I have this toothbrush. I'm not going to use it on this end because I'm going to use it on this end later. But what I do is I take this area, when I take a toothbrush or just my nails and rub this area, it's a really good stimulation of the vagus nerve. And actually in Chinese medicine, they recommend this as an alternative for when kids need to have the ears punctured, you know, like when they have many infections for babies and small children. And see, when you do this, if something comes up, if you swallow or your ears open, right behind the ear, we can start massaging the face. And what I find that's really good is just along the cheekbones. I have these 2 points just about here. See if you can find them. They're fairly painful. And if you're in pain, you found them. And I'm just going to press in, and I ground myself to the chair or to the floor. And again, I wait for a reaction. And as soon as I get the reaction, I'm gone. I don't need to do it again. With the oral segment, we have a lot of exercise that some of them we actually work with in bioenergetics anyway. See if your mouth is watering, if you have more saliva, yeah? That's also a sign of the social engagement system turning on, yeah? So we have, I like working with the mouth. Does anybody in here know about the Paula system? Have you heard about it? It's a system that works with ring muscles in the body. And she says that there's a connection between all of the ring muscles in the body from the time that we were, evolutionary speaking, worms. From that time that we were all worms, we have like a central, Reich actually talks about, the central pipe that goes in the body. So along that central pipe, we have circular muscles of the eyes and of the larynx and of the pharynx and the palms of the hand that open and close. And we have corresponding muscles in the soles of the feet as well. And of course, the muscles of the pelvis at the base of the vagina and at the base of the bladder and at the base of the penis and at the anus. So all these round muscles are actually interconnected. And this is a way that we can work the lower part of the body, the lower segments, and still stimulate the vagus. But I don't want to work in ways that will stimulate much of the dorsal vagus, yeah? So I want to work with those exercises that work with the eyes, for instance. There's a very good exercise that I really like. I take my thumbs and I stick them in here. There's a place here, it's fairly deep inside, where I can feel if I turn my eyeball, I can feel the eyes turning. Yeah, I can feel them moving. You found the spot? If you don't feel it moving, you may want to push in a little bit deeper. And now when I have it, what I want to do is just roll the eyes. So I'm going to roll the eyes as far as I can to the utter periphery of the visual field. And maybe you'll feel the mouth watering. Maybe some yawning coming up. And another oral exercise that I really like and also has to do with these muscles is taking the tongue, doing some, I don't remember, I think Stanley Rosenberg was the one that said that working with any oral activity like sucking or mouthing or chewing or biting, any of that oral activity is like a aerobic exercise for the vagus. So if you want to get vagal tone up, yeah, we eat and talk and laugh and all of that and cry, of course, is all. So we want to take the tongue behind our back teeth in the upper jaw and then in the lower jaw. But we want to do it in a way that it moves the whole face. So we want to take the tip of the tongue behind the last upper tooth. And then the other side. Now remember the vagus innervates the voice box. So we want to close the voice box a little bit, and we want some of that, we're going to get to it in the cervical segment. So we want a little bit of voice to come out. And you can do it, you can feel the tension in the eyes, and you can feel the tension in these muscles, which are all interconnected. They're all stemming from cranial nerves. So opening sinuses, we have some exercises. Of course, the nose can start being ticklish, yeah? Opening sinuses, there are several, I think, exercises to open the sinuses. The most common one is when you ground and you put your head down. Many, many times you're going to open the sinuses just from overlapping. When somebody has a, not a migraine, but a sinusitis, you call it, right, sinusitis, you have them stand on their heads. It's really painful in the beginning, but that opens the sinuses. And of course, it goes the other way around. Much of the work that we do with the vagus will open the sinuses. So if you have sinusitis, you can work the face and work the skull and work the facial muscles. I'm going to show you now. I think I want to show you a slide. Just bear with me for 1 second. I want to show you a slide that has to do with the cranial nerves. Now, it's a terribly dense slide, so don't be alarmed, but just have a look and see. These are the cranial nerves. We have 12 nerves. This number 10 is the vagus. And as you can see, some of it is motor and some of it is sensory. It's a little bit hard to see, I'm sorry. But if you can come a little bit closer, you'll see that all the 12 cranial nerves actually have to do with social engagement activities. and with activities. Part of the social engagement system has to do with long-term survival in restful conditions. So it's not fight or flight. It's not run for your life survival, but it's about eating. It's about mating. It's about looking to see where prey is or where good vegetables are. And it's about hearing and listening. And mammals, this is also something that Porges talks about, are with the mammalian nervous system developed prosody. Animals, for instance, a lizard doesn't have that. It just has the beep, 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 whether it's hungry or angry or mating or calm. It has the same sound. We have a whole range of sounds that are different and have to do with emotions. We are the only mammals have a movement in the inner ear. And this is what Porges based the Safe and Sound protocol on this fact. So we want to work all these nerves as part of awakening the social engagement system. Okay. So, want to go back now. Ears, we said touch and stimulate. Larynx and pharynx, swallowing, sucking. I don't know how to say this in English. In Hebrew, we say li'alua because it moves the uvula. The uvula is the little bell-like. Is that the way to say it? Uvula in English? Yeah? Okay, it's not my native tongue, English, So we want to move it. We can say in Hebrew, you have a word. It's called lila'alea. Like, I think the Arab language has a lot of in it. So try to see if you can do it. Not too much because it can get you, it can also get the vomiting reflex on. So by the way, as I was sitting in front of this patient, this is what I was doing very quietly. I was just playing with my uvula so I could ground in ventral. I just took, what happens when sympathetic comes on is that our antennae get really, focused on the threat, the source of the threat. And what we want to do is take the antennae and turn them in and work with ourselves. That's why we have to practice. So, voice box and trachea. Do you know Ujjayi breathing from yoga? Does anyone know it? Ujjayi breathing in yoga, it has to do with closing when we're in conditions where we can't really make too much sound. What we do is we whisper the sound. So we have a closure of the voice box enough to do, and just breathing like that stimulates your vagus. And a really good exercise is also from yoga. It's the Bumble Bee Exercise. It goes, you start like a horse. You start after you master that, because you need to be a little bit soft in order to do that, you can go and for a more, I start scratching, for a more bee-like movement, and it's quite subtle, and it's like, with a little bit of sound. And some movement in your lips. It can be really scratchy in the beginning. But because it works with the voice box and the oral segment and with the airways and with the diaphragm, it's a really, really good grounding in ventral exercise. And also, if you can do it now a little bit more loudly to yourselves and you can close your eyes, you can feel that it really resonates inside your skull. And remember, those cranial nerves are inside the skull. So we can continue with stimulating the lungs with the stool or the roll. And of course, we can have our grounding exercises and the Paula exercises I mentioned to incorporate the lower limbs, although they're below the diaphragm. And of course, we have so many bioenergetic exercises. Susan, you were tapping a little bit, and the exercise, wonderful exercise class that I was in before, I wrote down her name. It was really wonderful. It was Paula from New York. And so many of her exercises were actually grounding and ventral exercises. And and Helen yesterday mentioned in her talk, she mentioned pressing down with our feet to the ground. Remember she mentioned that? Also pushing down and feeling the impact on the central axis of the body, right to the top of the head and going into the breathing wave that we all know, yeah? Can actually get your whole vagus activated. Yeah, I'm stuck. I don't know why I'm stuck. I don't know why I'm stuck. I'm stuck, but I'm not going to get into the freeze response just yet because we've been working with our vagus. So the question, of course, of why we do this or which exercise I'm going to choose has to do what... I have an internet problem. Forgive me. Can you hear me? Yeah? Oh, okay. So in that case, it's not a serious internet problem. Okay. So what I really like, instead of having another exercise regime that I need to do, and I feel really shitty about not doing, yeah? And if I say, why don't you add 2 or 3 exercises a day? It only takes 5 minutes, right? But this only takes 5 minutes and stool only takes 5 minutes. And we're just ridden with stuff, with exercises that we have to do. So I actually really like doing some exercises that are actually on the go. What have I done now? Am I still in print screen? Okay. So what I like to do, I'm just trying to get rid of something here. Okay, on the go micro practice, I think is a good antidote to avoid this guilt. Because as I said, what we want to have safety. And we don't need to say, okay, now I'm going to open my yoga mat and I have an hour or half an hour to practice. We can actually do it very, very differently. When we get up in the morning, we can wash our face with cold water. And the other thing is when you take your shower, in the very end, take the faucet to the cold water until it's absolutely cold and just be there for 3 seconds. That's enough to give a jump start to the vagus. Dramatic teeth brushing. This is why I brought my toothbrush, because when you brush your teeth, which you do anyway, you can do it by moving literally your whole body and having a really dramatic, it's not a pretty sight, but it works. So I really try to incorporate as much as my face in the dramatic teeth brushing. And kids love this. If you teach your kids about this, the whole family can do it and start the whole morning, the terrible morning routine with being anchored and grounded in ventral. Conscious biting and eating. We're eating anyway, so why not eat? Again, with a little bit of drama, with some drama in our life. Singing in the car is a really good one. We do it anyway as bioenergetic practitioners. We do it anyway. Sometimes we feel something is stuck. We get into the car, we get on the highway, we put on the radio really loud and we sing, and then we can cry, right? We do it anyway. So as a routine, everybody's with their cell phones anyway. Nobody's going to think we're crazy anymore. Everybody is like this in the car anyway. And this is on the go. When I stand in traffic, I do my eyes exercises, even a silly thing like I shift my focus from the windshield to the traffic light and back to the windshield, working with my eyes. So I want to give you a little bit practice recommendations. And the practice recommendations is, first of all, let pleasure guide you, because it can't be another guilty thing that you need to do. And we want to promote a feeling of safety. We want to get that feedback loop working. So it has to be a good feeling for me. My yoga teacher, she's Italian, and she says, if it doesn't feel pretty, don't do it. Do it only if it feels pretty. So the same goes for this. The other thing is be creative. I just gave you a few examples. But when I minded to my vagus and I minded to my cranial nerves, so much can be done just on the go. The way I do the Stanley Rosenberg basic exercise today is completely different, just because these days, this is what I'm doing, and it's also going to change. There's one bioenergetic exercise that I think I learned from Yardi at the time, who used to give many, many wonderful exercise classes. And she used to take the head to one side and then up and down. It's very difficult to do it 2 weeks after you fell on your back from a camel. But I do this, so I do it much smaller today, and I look to the back. So from the side, it looks something like this. Yeah. So it's a much stronger exercise than the basic exercise, but I just play with it and I feel what I want to do. The other thing is micro exercise. Exercise can be 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. It needs to feel good. It needs to feel nice. And the last thing is to be very, very persistent. If you want to make a change, if you want to really bring your being grounded in ventral so it's available for you when you need it most, you have to be persistent and practice it. Find the ways to practice it in your daily life, because neuroplasticity is a wonderful, wonderful thing. We can really change our brains and change the way it works, but we have to give neuroplasticity the conditions in which it can work. And it can work only when we are persistent, when we do the same exercise again and again and again. In Hebrew, we have a militaristic society here in Israel. There's a coined proverb, and it says, difficult in practice, easy in battle. I think it's a horrible proverb, but it's fitting here, yeah? So we want to practice this grounding in ventral daily in ease and safe conditions, so that we may have the infrastructure to turn to when the going gets rough. When we're overwhelmed, it's going to be really difficult to ground unless we know how. Also, the more we do something, the more we practice, the more the brain responds to support that thing, yeah? The brain's ability to build neural pathways as a result of experience is based on repetition of neurons firing together, and then they wire together. So the interrelations of neurons, and within the neurons themselves, the synapses, they become more elaborate and rich in number. And that's the way that we build a network. That's actually the way that we form a habit, a good one. The guy that wrote the man that wrote the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, said this practice becomes rooted, firmly rooted, when it is done with persistence. So we want to form a new habit of relaxing, of being grounded in ventral, of feeling good. And it's not just relaxing and feeling good, because being in ventral is being really alive, of being prone to be connected, to be in contact, of self-regulating, of touching, of holding, and being held. We want to change our nervous system and recreate habits. These are some of the books that I based this presentation on. This is the Stanley Rosenberg book. If you want to start with a book, this is a really wonderful, wonderful book to start with. And thank you. I want to open it. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to open the floor now for questions or comments.
I have a question. I'm going to try to speak in English, but my English is not so good. Sometimes when I move my eyes, I feel anxious. And sometimes it doesn't. When we were doing the movement with the eyes, I had to move very slowly and breathe to be good, to feel my ventral response. But I noticed that when I'm moving my eyes, I stop breathing. And I think that this is something that the Zoom, the classes, that the time that I spend in Zoom make with me. I keep using my eyes and not breathing, because I noticed that if I move my eyes and breathe, I can get the calm response. But I identify myself with the animal that was with the eyes like that we saw in the video. Wow. The eyes very immobilized with no movement. So I wanted to share this and to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, First of all, thank you. I want to say that the Zoom, I think most of us can identify how unnatural it is for us, how crazy of a situation it actually is to connect this way, that all we see is these heads in 2 dimensions. And in a way, it's been crazy, crazy couple of years. Now, I don't know neurologically what it is that makes it, you're probably very sensitive, but I would just say, go as slow as you want, because we all have our different baselines, and your baseline is yours. My baseline changes, from day to day as well. We all have different bodies. Just trust your process and do it only as much as it feels safe and good. And it'll change. It'll become a little bit more toned and a little bit more flexible. And if there's any anxiety in there, of course, the anxiety will go down, because rather than avoiding something, the anxiety goes down when we face it, but only as it feels right to you. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
Is there some research about someone who's talking about the character analysis and the nervous system and different kinds of vagus activations for different characters?
That's such an interesting question. That's such an interesting question. Well, I would think that different holding patterns, yeah, would have different vagus tendencies. I would think that the ocular segment being really tight, like in schizoid characters, would have to be less grounded in ventral. I don't know, this is just off the top of my head thinking, I don't know of any research being done. I'm not sure that the polyvagal theory is ingrained enough or assimilated enough in bioenergetics and or bioenergetic research. But I would definitely think that we can, while you investigate, while you research your own body and how it works and how it goes, it would be very different for different characters to work with these muscles, mainly muscles, because I think that character has so much to do with a deep holding in the fascia as well, not just in the muscles and all the soft tissues. And I don't actually know if the vagus or the cranial nerves innervate fascia. I don't think so. I think they just innervate the muscles. But I need to check on that. I think it's a really good question that I would kind of work with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, no, not too.
Sorry?
No, I'm just curious about the polyvagal theory, and I was thinking how to relate with bioenergetic practice, and it's like.
Well, it has to also be said that the polyvagal theory is a very rich theory, and most of its applications have to do with building resilience, because what we actually need all 3 parts. I don't remember who it was today. I wrote it down. I think it was Dunker who said that no, I don't remember who it was. Somebody said that sometimes we need to dissociate, yeah? Or sometimes we need to, when the grief was too much to handle, or sometimes we need to be cut off. And sometimes we need to fight or flight. And we need to be able to have a flexible nervous system, because a flexible nervous system is a strong nervous system. A strong nervous system, a resilient nervous system is one that doesn't get stuck. And a lot of the polyvagal theory work has to do with post-traumatic conditions, which are in fact stuck. People get stuck on dorsal sympathetic activation. So they can be suffering tremendously in a very rigid, stuck immobility, not being able to work or to function or to relate or to connect. And they're sort of trapped in this immobility, but have a lot of sympathetic activation as well. And they can't sleep, for instance, or there's so much disquiet going on inside them. And I find that it really these formulations really help when working with post-trauma. Yes, Vincentia. Thank you, Renato.
Lisa, it's such your presentation is so great. I just want to say that, and what you have on the screen, it's so clear, and I'm really appreciating the clarity and the presentation, and so many different things you gave us that we could do. It was very, very enriching. When you were just talking about that, and we think about having a patient who's feeling shocked or frozen or trapped, and I think where polyvagal really helps me a lot is, what can I do to facilitate the safety? So if somebody doesn't feel safe, and the safest thing they can do is kind of dissociate to protect themselves, like you were saying, from overwhelming physical or emotional pain, then that's their safest thing. It's the most primitive, but it's the safest thing they could do. So I think as a therapist, I'm always thinking, this person is, no matter what their behavior is, if they're being rageful toward me or whatever it is, they are doing the best at that moment to protect themselves, to feel as safe as possible. And so my job is, how can I come around to help them feel even safer in some way to reconnect? So the safety danger dynamic in terms of polyvagal, I appreciate. And then the other thing I appreciate is your talking about yourself as a therapist who gets into those states. And what I like about polyvagal is there's no guilt. It's like, of course I want to run away or get mad at this person back or yell back. So if I understand that my sympathetic has been activated, and of course I want to, I want to run or go, instead of going, oh, I'm so bad, I don't care, I don't have compassion. What I do is go, of course, that I feel attacked. My body's going to do that. And my thinking brain is not hooked up enough to find a really perfect way in the moment immediately, right? Because my neuroception is like, I'm automatically reacting. So I loved what you gave us, which were all these little tools. You're sitting there in the office and you could do the tongue thing. Because I just supervised someone the other day who had that exact situation where the client was attacking her. She went into freeze, and then she went into her own guilt because she didn't know how to come out of the freeze. And her compassion, she knew it was somewhere in the room, but she couldn't grab it. Why? Because she felt threatened. You can't open your heart when you feel threatened. Sure. Anyway, I just think polyvagal theory is such a contribution to working somatically, bioenergetically, and really appreciate, I know I'm saying a lot of things, but I'm really appreciating both the things the therapist can do and the relational dynamic in terms of looking at it as how can we help that person's doing the best they can to protect themselves. How can we make them feel safer in the room to kind of return to the social engagement? So anyway, I really appreciate it. It's very enriching.
Thank you. It's really enlightening. I've got like two things that I thought when you were talking. Let me see if I can grab them. One is that Porges actually says that safety is the therapy. For him also, it's the most important thing. And Deb Dana, who is a clinician, as I said, works a lot with the safety issue. For me, I have to say, I work quite a bit on psychoeducation with patients, and even patients with PTSD who know they have, you know, post-trauma. And I can really teach them some tools to be able to self-regulate. And for people who have so little control over their lives, the ability to learn to self-regulate is priceless. So that's also something that, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. I love your book.
Oh, thank you.
I'm honored that you're here.
That's very good. Thank you.
I just had a comment about Claudia's response or question, if it's okay. I was just thinking, when it came to me right away, that when I've asked other people I've done the basic exercise before. I love it. I find it very easily, anyone can do it, is why I love it. And one of the things I always say when people are so focused and concentrate on trying to look, it's like breathe and blink. Like, it was my automatic, like, be normal and don't forget to breathe and blink, because I find we try to do something so well, or we're trying to get the exercise or to, you know, do it right. And it's like, we forget the basic things. So when I do the exercise, my automatic thought to myself, it's okay, just breathe. And you're allowed to blink. So I just wanted to share that simple.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I would like, if I'm allowed to comment a little thing about this. Many times when we say to somebody breathe, that can actually create some stress. Sometimes I'm not saying, of course, like, it's just an association that I have to what you said. Because when somebody, of course, the way to stop the breath is to say, don't think about your breath. Yeah, it's like a pink elephant or something. What I find that can maybe help is saying, try to elongate your out breath a little bit. And then at the end, just let go and let the in-breath come in. We're not interested at all in the in-breath. I don't care about it at all. Just be interested in the out-breath. And because it's such magic, because that's what turns the social engagement system on. Yeah.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.